So Lewis Crocker and Paddy Donovan are set for a rematch. The first fight was a grueling contest. Paddy was dominating, but a punch after the bell made the fight a disqualification. This was an electric night. Now, can Lewis Crocker make adjustments, or can Paddy replicate the previous performance, minor the disqualification? This may be another great night. So there was like two narratives of this fight. The first narrative was that Paddy was dominating. He was dominating the fight. And then the second narrative was that he got disqualified, or that he was fouling, and those foulings led to a disqualification, the final incident being a punch after the bell. So I want to jump straight in and kind of ascertain what each fighter needs to do to win. So this is just simply from my perspective. So I feel like in the fight, one of the issues, when you look at Paddy, the first thing he does, he uses his jab, and he's blurring your vision, and then he's snapping it, and then he's feinting, and he's moving, and he's a southpaw. So I think the first thing that Lewis Crocker needs to try and do is get his hand moving, try and, tap the shoulder, try to nullify his right jab, Paddy's right jab, and try and jab the shoulder if possible. Try and jab the bicep, and, try and blur his vision the same way that he blurred your vision. So try and blur the vision, try and control the shoulder, obviously throw the jab to the head, throw it to the chest, but sometimes throw it to the bicep, to the arm. Because as the fight progresses, if his arm is hurting significantly bad, or if he's damaged his arm, he's less likely to use the jab, so it will affect his jab output. And Paddy, the jab is a major part of his arsenal. So I think that's the first thing he needs to do. And while he's doing that, so it's feint, it's parries, it's trying to control the shoulder, it's jabbing the head, but also jabbing the arm, jabbing the chest. I think there needs to be a variation on his jab, and he needs to enter the battle of the jabs. He may not win the battle of the jabs, but he needs to enter the battle of the jabs. And also another thing that was interesting in the fight is that when I was observing the fight, I noticed that Paddy would put his head on, I'm assuming he was trying to put his head on Lewis's chest. So I'm assuming he was trying to put his head on Lewis's chest, but he would put his head forward and then their heads would clash. So I don't think this was intentional. I think it's when you put your head on the opponent's chest, and you kind of create a limited target. Now, there's a few ways that Crocker can deal with this. He can either step to the side, or he could pivot. So if you come in like that and you just simply step to the side, then that nullifies the head damage, the potential head damage, and it creates a new angle. Alternatively, you can walk him into a punch, because it's the motion of going from here to here. You can time an opponent into a shot. So I feel that this whole thing about the use of the head, and let's assume it was unintentional, that can be used against Paddy. And also, I feel that what he needs to do is that when Paddy has this thing, and it's a good thing, he'll throw punches quickly. He can either throw punches hard, or he can throw them short. Lennox Lewis used to do the same thing. And I think that when he's throwing clusters of punches, I feel that Lewis Crocker needs to interrupt those cluster of punches. And one of the best ways to do it is to go to the body and then to the head. So it could be like the straight right to the body and then the left hook to the head, or the left hook to the head and the straight right to the body. But he really needs to interrupt Paddy's rhythm. Another thing is that Paddy's stepping a lot to the right. He's stepping a lot to the right. So when he's stepping to the right, there's a few things he can do here. He can throw the left hook, or he can feint with the left hook and then, introduce the right hand, or, feint with the left hook, throw the right hand, left hook, right hand, etc. But he does need to try and capitalize on that when he's moving to the right. Now, if he can't get the hard left hook off, then get the feint off, because the feint can be used to set up different phases. And I think that's really important, because You want to take that away from him. You don't want him to be confident, to be just moving to the right all the time, or to be dipping to the right and to, feel confident doing that. And also in round 8, there's a reference point where Lewis Crocker lands a counter left hook. And it was a very hard punch. And I think he needs to do more of that. Obviously you've got to set it up, but he needs to do more of that. And ultimately, I think Crocker needs more punch creativity. He needs more punch creativity. And, so we need head, body, head. If you're going to try and set up the overhand right, just don't throw the overhand right, because Paddy's going to see it. Set it up with jabs to the chest, jabs to the shoulder, and then throw the overhand right, or throw some feints. You've got to give him different looks. You can't just open the door. You have to really show some variation and show some boxing intelligence to be able to nullify Paddy and to be able to hit him. Because Paddy's using movement. He's moving his head, he's moving his legs, he's an evasive target. So you really need some creativity to be able to penetrate that. And I think taking the center of the ring is important as well, to dictate. As Paddy's moving, you can take the center of the ring and only retreat if you're trying to set Paddy up for a trap. And a lot of fighters will do this. They'll, step back to try and walk you into some punches. But generally speaking, I think taking the center of the ring. So what does Paddy need to do to win? Well, Paddy needs to keep utilizing that jab. He busted Lewis Crocker's, was it his left eye? So if he's busting your left eye, the right jab's coming from here. So he needs to, again, do the same thing. Blur the vision, parry, feint, then shoot it, and keep that going. The counter left he used a lot if Lewis Crocker stepped in crudely, he would throw the counter left. Sometimes he would throw the lead left. So I think that works. I think also the short punches are really good. I think the short punches, shortening up the punches, because it potentially could be a long night. So you want to make sure that you reserve stuff in the gas tank. If you do go to the body, probably set it up with the right hook first and then the left hook to the body. And just, use your movement. And with the jab, of course, you need to vary it, but aim for that eye. Because he hasn't, how long ago was the fight? But it can reopen. So he should be aiming for the eye. I think a 2-3, because that's, from the southpaw position. I think the straight left and the right hook would be a good combination to use. And I think he should do what he did. Effectively, he would use movement. And then Lewis Crocker would come towards him. He would punch at the target and then he would spin out. And I think he should just reiterate those tactics. So I think what we have here is that Lewis Crocker needs to change nearly everything, but Paddy just needs to show discipline. So Lewis Crocker needs to change everything, but Paddy needs to show some discipline. And it looks like that whole thing of when he puts the head on the shoulder, that's something that he's probably been taught. And the way Lewis Crocker moves, it just, they just clash heads. So they need to be learning to unlearn that habit for this fight, because if this does happen again, then there's a strong possibility that there could be a disqualification. So it's a difficult one, because when you're on the inside, you need to get a lower sense of gravity and you don't want to stand up straight to become a bigger target. But at the same time, he has to be aware that, if the referee starts putting pressure on him, that could affect his offense, that could affect his defense, and it can affect his mind state. So I think in the camp, particularly with Paddy, it's about staying composed and trying to nullify that particular habit. And that might be actually difficult. And that was a variable of the fight that you couldn't really predict that was going to happen. But that's something that they need to get creative with. Now, if Lewis Crocker's stepping to the side when he's doing it, then he'll have a different problem. So you won't have a problem with the heads clashing, but he'll have a problem where Lewis Crocker's creating different angles and openings for punches. But Paddy's composure is really important here. it's so important because, like I said, he was clearly winning the fight, but yet he landed a punch after the bell. So he needs to really maintain his composure and just be aware of everything. Like hearing the bell sounds, but because you're in the moment, you let off punches after the bell and knocking someone out. You need to be taking in everything. You need to be so aware. So the one thing that Paddy needs to work on, he wants to replicate the dominance. However, he needs to deal with the head issue, because that could increase the chances of the fight being stopped. And I don't know, maybe they need to do some drill with regards to ensuring that he hears that, that bell at the end of the round, to ensure that he doesn't throw any punches after the bell, because that cost him the fight last time. I think another crucial part of this fight will be the trainers. So you got Andy Lee. Andy Lee is like the hottest trainer in Britain right now. I mean, he's got a stable of some really good fighters. Off the top of the head, I can think of Joseph Parker. And Joseph Parker, I believe, is the #1 contender for Usyk, and he's had a sequence of great performances. He's totally revitalized Joseph Parker's career, and he's really added to him as a fighter. And who else has he got? He's got Shiraz, and Shiraz has looked really good. He had a total domination of was it Edgar Berlanga? Apologies if I mispronounced that. And he has Ben Whittaker, and Ben Whittaker again had another great performance. So he's got a fighting environment where you've got fighters with a lot of passion, with a lot of energy, with a lot of commitment, and that's a really good fighting environment. And then you got Billy Nelson again, who's a respected trainer. He's probably, well, I know him for the Martin Bakole work. So you got Martin Bakole, but you got some other fighters in that stable. So that will be a lively environment. But the point here is that I think the strategies leading into this fight and who they pick as sparring partners and the strategies that they put together are going to be so important for the outcome of this fight, but also ensuring that the communication is not just good pre-fight in terms of determining what the plan is and communicating that effectively to the fighter, but also in between rounds to ensure that the fighters are following instructions. Andy Lee, I think, is a really excellent communicator pre-fight and in between rounds. But this will be a really good test. And I think the magnitude of the fight, when I rewatched it, what kind of shocked me was how big this fight is in Ireland. It was huge. You could really feel the atmosphere. And when I watched it on my big TV, you could feel that, yeah, these warriors, they're highly loved by the Irish public, and they really came out to support them, and that's a great thing. Now, with regards to the outcome, I think looking at it objectively, you would give Paddy an edge, but there's pressure on Paddy. There's pressure for him to duplicate the performance, but there's also pressure with regards to him not duplicating the fouls. This kind of reminds me, and hopefully this doesn't happen to him, of the Andrew Golotto-Riddick Bowe situation, where Andrew Golotto, I think he lost the first fight due to fouls, but he was dominating the fight. But then he lost the second fight due to fouling. So this is going to be a real good test of his temperament and a real good test of his character. But I think even with those barriers, because you could argue there's not as much pressure on Lewis Crocker, you would make him the favorite. You would definitely make him the favorite in this fight. It's looking like a 60-40, maybe 65-35 in Paddy's favor. But the last one, the atmosphere was so huge, and both guys will be making amendments. Both guys will be coming in to put it all on the line, and it should be a great fight.